Senator Kaine.
Thank you, Senator Tuberville, and thanks to the witnesses. Just to follow up a little bit on the IDEA issue, because this is one that troubles me too, separate and apart from the discussion about the scholarship program. I've always been troubled by this underfunding as a former mayor and governor. It's kind of interesting. The IDEA, revolutionary law, unlike many educational laws, I've never heard somebody say we should undo the IDEA. They complain about the paperwork and they complain about the underfunding, but I think everybody realizes the notion that a child with a disability should get an individualized plan so they can be all they can be. What a great idea. It's one of the best civil rights laws we have. But the underfunding is a huge problem. So when I was mayor of Richmond, school boards in Virginia do not have their own taxing authority. So they come hat in hand to their board of supervisors or city council together with state funds and federal funds. And so the biggest part of the city of Richmond's budget every year is the allocation that we make to our school system, about 25,000 students. But if the federal government was fully funding IDEA, Richmond might decide, wow, we're spending, just like you, Mr. Barrett, talked about what you have to spend, that you could spend it on teacher salaries. You could spend it on additional hiring. You could spend it on physical improvements. San Diego would spend that extra different than Richmond, and that's fine. It would, localities with full federal participation could do more. And so that's why I have worked with Senator Collins over the years to try to find strategies to get us, not immediately, but to get us to what that 40% deal originally was. And we'd really help out a lot of schools if we did. The proposals that in the reconciliation bill with respect to tax credit for scholarships. Now, contributions to private schools are already tax deductible because they're 501c3. So there's already a tax deduction if you make it. But this is in addition to a tax deduction, to a tax credit. Is there any restriction about whether the schools that can utilize those tax credits have to follow the IDEA?
Absolutely not, Senator. And the issue when we subsidize private entities is that there is in fact no accountability. We're talking about the system of accountability and assessment. How do we know that private schools, first of all, are going to admit a fair number of students with disabilities?
And just so I'm going to let everybody else respond to Mr. Brewer, because this is an important point.
How do we know that that private schools are going to in fact employ evidence-based strategies to support students with disabilities and all students? How do we know that private schools are going to even participate in the Smarter Balance assessments or in the NAEP or any of that?
Just to the other witnesses on this point, does the reconciliation bill require that private schools that might avail themselves of this credit follow the IDA? Does it excuse them from following the IDA, or is it TBD based on regulations that the Treasury Department comes up with?
Well, IDA has been around for 50 years, and throughout that whole history, private school students have benefited from equitable services funding through IDEA. This is not new for private schools. It's not new for students with disabilities to attend private schools. My daughters would be an example of that. And when we talk about school choice programs, we have hundreds of thousands of students with disabilities benefiting from state school choice programs. So these are families who have chosen to say, this whole IEP and IDEA, that regime was not working for my child. I need to go find another option. And they take advantage of those school choice options.
But are the schools required to follow the IDEA?
That's not in the provision for the tax credit.
Not current law and not in the provision in the reconciliation.
No, and like I said, for the 50-year history of IDEA, there has been a relationship between students with special needs and private schools, and that's not been a requirement.
Is Ms. Gentle's point? Do you guys generally agree with that?
Yeah, I think I have not heard anyone disagreeing with the premise or the idea or the promise of IDEA. I don't think anyone's disagreeing with that and the importance of doing that. One of the reasons we care so much.
But parents cannot, say sort of challenge a school like they can in the public school setting. Hey, wait a minute, you're not really doing the right thing by my kid's particular disability, right? With private schools, that's not a possibility.
A plan. Private school families, they still have a plan, a private services plan. There's still a process in place.
but is it enforceable in the way that it is against public schools?
I think plenty of parents of students with disabilities would tell you that the IDEA process is incredibly broken. It's not enforced, and they have to hire very expensive lawyers to sue
Yeah.
in order to get their FAPE rights, in order to get services and accommodations.
Look,
this takes the lawyer out.
Can I just say it's true that some aren't happy with it. It's also true that massive numbers of students, about 15% of the kids in the Virginia public school systems, are on IEPs. One of my kids
Yeah,
was.
I'm familiar.
Most kids on IEPs end up working out of the IEP because the services that are provided under the IDEA through an IEP enable a student who has a special need to sort of get the extra that they need, and then they're mainstreamed with no IEP because there's been success. There are people who aren't happy with it who sue the Henrico School Board. I get that, but I think overwhelmingly for the 15% of kids in our public school systems that are on IEPs, they are they're availing themselves of a whole lot more than they used to be able to before the IDA was passed. Last thing I'll just say, and then I'm going to hand it back to you, Mr. Chair. I want to applaud the chairman who has now walked in, Senator Cassidy, and some of my Republican colleagues for joining with us when we complained at the Secretary of Education pausing these Title IV funds that were being used for literacy. Before school programs, after school programs, summer school programs, so kids wouldn't fall back. 23 million with help from Virginia, tens of millions from other states. When we put this on the table last week, a lot of Republicans joined in, leaned in pretty hard with Secretary McMahon, while she is still pausing other funds, English language learners, which are about literacy, student mental health, which can advance literacy, at least on the 21st century community learning centers. Those dollars have been released with a bipartisan effort, and I thanks Secretary McMahon for that, and I thank my colleagues for helping out.